Successful Escapes, number 16. Hello, I'm HG Tudor, continuing with this series of allowing you to hear from the people that have been caught by narcissists, enabling you to know what they did about it, what they learned, and how they used my work, my material, my knowledge to enable them to attain a successful escape. We now hear from a long-standing client of mine with a detailed explanation about how she achieved a magnificent and successful escape from the narcissist that she was involved in. Here's Kristen.
Hi, my name is Kristen and I live in the United States. My successful escape has been a long time coming. When I found HG almost 4 years ago, I was in an emotional and physically abusive marriage to an upper lesser narcissist. At that point in time, we'd been married for 29 years. My then husband was a very successful attorney and business owner. He was quite intelligent, funny, and well-liked by friends and colleagues. We married right out of college, and when the drinking and abuse began shortly after, I was taken aback. I'll never forget waking up on our 1-year anniversary thinking, is this it? I kept holding on to his false promises and the hope that he would change, but I began to shut down in the first few months. Although our friends and family loved him, they were bewildered at his treatment of me. I became quite adept at making excuses for his behavior, which obviously got me nowhere. For the first 17 years of our marriage, I believed his alcoholism was the root cause of the abuse. When I didn't succumb to his drunk advances, things turned ugly. I was so confused as to why I hated myself for years and why nothing was good enough. He was generous, took great care of our family, and always said he loved us. But I couldn't help but think, why is he so abusive? Only after I met HG did I realize he'd been gaslighting me, among other things, for decades, and I finally understood who the monster was with whom I'd been living. At that same time, I discovered he was having an affair while planning his surprise 40th birthday party. This was extremely traumatic, as it was a huge fear of mine, second only to losing my children. I would never take my own life, but admittedly I wanted to be removed from this earth. Those intrusive thoughts continued on and off for many years because I just did not see an end to the pain. HG's encountered thousands of these situations and reassured me that my thoughts were not unusual given the circumstances. We reconciled, and that is when he became sober. I was so grateful that I told him it was worth waiting 17 years. Things were fine for a while, but much to my dismay, the physical and emotional abuse became worse. I have a scar on my hand where he scratched me. He's hit me, drawn blood, left bruises, and ran over my foot. That's just the tip of the iceberg, and I've blocked out the majority of his abuse. Was he a dry drunk? Was it my fault? Truth be told, after being worn down for so many years, I couldn't give him the affection, love, and attention he so desperately needed. I was in survival mode and riding his wave of crazy every day. Oddly enough, I'll say the physical abuse was much easier than the verbal and emotional. There were times when I hoped he would hit me in the face, leaving a mark so it would be obvious and I could kick him out. It was also wishful thinking because I naively thought it would make a divorce more cut and dry and lessen the pain that would ensue. For the next 10 years, my mental health began to deteriorate. I've always been a happy person, but not around him because each day was unpredictable. At around year 27 of our marriage, my physical health took a nosedive. Doctors ran lots of tests and concluded that it was due to stress. And I thought to myself, if you only knew. For years, I was nauseous in my own home, and when I would leave for a respite, it returned before I came back. Once I realized what my husband was, and that I would divorce him, HG guided me through the day-to-day challenges and kept me focused on the future. At that time, my youngest was still in high school, and I didn't want to put her through the trauma of a divorce. HG was very understanding and respected my decision. There were many ups and downs as I navigated through the first and second emotional seas. I purchased the Divorcing the Narcissist package and read the book Escape. He He was always very upfront with me about what I should expect, and for that I was grateful. Although I prepared for the worst, there was always a small part of me that secretly hoped it would go smoothly. Consults with HG were vital for my survival and successful escape. It never failed. I felt like a new person after we spoke, and I still do after each of our consults. The many posts that HG's generously provided kept me on track. I found out that even though I had acquired a vast amount of knowledge, it was important for me to continue to revisit the articles and assistance packages because I was still being provoked, manipulated, and abused. They help reduce my emotional thinking because, as many of you know, the roller coaster ride messes with your mind and you don't know which end is up. I did the narc and empath detectors and purchased many of the assistance packages. I found the addiction and divorcing a narcissist particularly helpful. Blog support was a lifeline as I navigated through the realization that my husband was a narcissist. I read countless stories of people escaping but couldn't imagine ever leaving myself. Many of you still post, and I'll never forget the support you provided. Initially, I had a hard time accepting and believing some of the videos that HG posted about narcissism, but I now know them to be the truth. For example, HG's video, "Does the narcissist love your children?" I thought, absolutely. My husband adores our children, and he's the exception. If you could just see how much he loves them, his affection toward them, and how he gets upset when they're struggling. Then I listened to the video, and I was convinced. I now see that our children are just an extension, and that the act is just that, an act. Secondly, and I believe this is most difficult to accept, the narcissist does not love you, never has, and never will. The video entitled "This Mindset Equals Victory" made me a believer. What clenched it for me was when HG said they cannot love you and abuse you at the same time. In a strange way, it was a relief. On the other hand, I grieved quite a bit. I no longer loved my husband as a wife should, but I looked back and I thought to myself, for the majority of my life, I gave everything to my marriage, and it was all a farce. I never mourned for what could have been because he's a narcissist, and it was doomed from the time we met. As I was getting ready to file for divorce, HG prepared me very well, and I went into the process with my eyes wide open. We spoke more frequently, and that was a godsend. I was so afraid of how my husband would react, as were my friends and family. I'd been in trouble for far less and knew what he was capable of. I got a safety deposit box for documents, jewelry, and cash, and gave other valuables to friends and family. My daughter was out of the country at the time, so I drove 12 hours to my mother's house and had him served the next day. Needless to say, it brought him to his knees, literally. He didn't eat for the entire week I was gone and was a different person when I returned. He did more in 1 week than in the 31 years we'd been together. He begged and pleaded for me to stay, but I was too far gone and there was no going back. He behaved during that time, but his old ways slowly began to creep back in. He finally realized I was done, and we moved forward with the divorce, which was complete in July. It's a privilege to have someone in my life that will always tell me the truth, no matter what I ask. I was able to vent to HG and share things with him that I could not have told anyone else. I consider it a rare gift and a privilege to have someone in my life that I can trust completely. I'm happier now than I've been in decades. Thankfully, I never lost myself or forgot who I was, and I'm now stronger than ever. There's no doubt in my mind that had it not been for HG, I would not be where I am now. Thank you for listening to my story, and most importantly, thank you for saving me, HG.
Thank you, Kristen, for sharing your experience. Kristen sharing what it was like to find herself in a long-term ensnarement, a 29-year marriage to an individual who ostensibly found himself liked by those who viewed the behavior externally, although they were bewildered at the way that he would treat his wife, Kristen. It's enabled you to understand, through her hard work and the application of my material, that she realised what she was dealing with and then set about doing something about it, and how the escape wasn't immediate, but she opted to play the long-term game and succeeded in achieving the escape that way. If you're interested in telling your story of how my work has assisted you with regard to a successful escape, then all you need to do is provide a video or an audio file to narcissist1909@gmail.com and share with the many others who are finding this series both fascinating and helpful. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.